Number one, the lens principle. The lens principle says who we are determines how we view others. I love the Groucho Marx comment. I wouldn't want to belong to any club that would accept me as a member. Says it all, doesn't it? You see, the question I must ask myself is, what is my perception of others? Because who you are determines the way you see everything. You cannot separate your identity from your perspective. All that you are and every experience that you've had color how you see things. It's in your lens. Here's what I mean. Number one, who you are determines what you see. A Coloradan moved to Texas and built a house with a large picture window from which he could view hundreds of miles of rangeland. When asked how he enjoyed the view, he responded, "The only problem is there's nothing to see." About the same time, a Texan moved to Colorado and built a house with a large picture window overlooking the Rockies. When asked how he liked it, he said, "The only problem with this place is that you can't see anything because all those mountains are in your way." Who you are determines how you see. I was having dinner the other day with Francis Hesselbein, and I was also having time with Jim Collins, having a wonderful, really 3-hour dinner in that process. And because Francis has been with Peter Drucker for many, many years, I asked her what was the greatest thing that he ever taught her. She said that he has said to her many, many times, "Francis, look out of the window and see things that are within your view that others do not see." What Peter Drucker was basically saying is, we all can look at the same thing, but we don't all see the same thing. We're going to see according to who we are. For example of that, my wife Margaret, very aware of what people wear. I am not. Many times we'll be at a party together and she'll say, "You know, you were talking to the guy in the blue sweater. What was he talking about this evening?" And I'll look at her and I'll say, "What blue sweater?" I can't relate. Now, she sees the person with the blue sweater. That's how she views people, by how they dress, what clothes they have on. Personally, that's nothing that really grabs hold of me. Now, see, she looks at a person entirely different than I look at a person. Who we are determines what we see. Number two, who you are determines how you see others. It's a classic old story of two guys, separate families that were moving into a little town, and on one day, one of the guys who was moving into town stopped at the local hardware store and said, "I've got to ask you a question." He said, "How are the people of this town?" And the owner of the hardware store looked at him and said, "Well, let me ask you a question. How were the people from the town that you came from?" He said, "Oh," he said, "they weren't very friendly." He said, "In fact, that's why I'm really glad to be moving to this town." And the guy at the hardware store said, "You know, I'm so sorry. They're not very friendly here either." A couple days later, another guy dropped by the same hardware store and said, "I'm moving here." He said, "I got to ask you a question. How are the people of the town?" And again, the owner of the hardware store looked at him and said, "Let me ask you, how were the people in the town that you just left?" "Oh," he said, "we hated to leave. Those people were so friendly and so warm. We had great relationships." And the owner of the hardware store said, "I've got great news for you. They're friendly here also." You see, it's a fact. Who you are determines how you see others. The way people see others is a reflection of themselves. For example, if I'm a trusting person, I will see others as trustworthy. If I'm a critical person, I will see others as critical. If I'm a caring person, I will see others as compassionate. Phil McGraw had it right when he said, "You teach people how to treat you." That is a powerful statement. Number three, who you are determines how you view life. I have the privilege of speaking to a lot of NFL teams. And one of the teams I've done a lot of work with is the St. Louis Rams. And I have a wonderful friend on the Rams team who is an offensive coach named John Matsko. And recently I was at a Rams game, and I was sitting with his wife, Kim, and some of the wives of the other coaches on the St. Louis team. And I know for a fact, because I've known John for probably 15, 18 years, that they've lived in at least 7 or 8 different cities. Kind of being a coach, they move from city to city and are coaching with different teams. And so I said, "Kim," I said, "I've got to ask you a question. Of all the cities you've lived in," I said, "what's your favorite city?" And she said to me, she said, well, where I am right now. I said, oh, you like St. Louis better than any other cities that you ever lived in? She said, I didn't say that. You asked me what my favorite city is. And she said, my favorite city is where I am right now. What Kim was really saying to me that day was, where you live, who you're around, basically, you're going to determine how you view people by how you are yourself. And Kim was saying, I have a good attitude about wherever I am, and so therefore I like wherever I am. Number 4, who you are determines what you do. The question I've always asked myself is, what determines who I am and who you are? Well, number 1 is genetics, no doubt about that. My wife and I have had the privilege of adopting 2 children. They're now grown, married, and we have 4 grandchildren from them. And they were great delights to us. But when I and Margaret adopted them, many years ago, I was about 85% an environmentalist and about a 15% genetics. Now, having raised 2 adopted children, I'm about 85% genetics and about 15% environment. It's kind of like when I was a pastor and didn't have any children, I had great lessons on how to raise your kids. Then I had some and went into about a 20-year silence. But who we are, major genetic issues. Number 2, self-image. He was exactly right when T.S. Eliot said, half of the harm that is done in this world is due to people who want to feel important. They do not mean to do harm. They are absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of themselves. Number 3, experiences in life. Basically, the experiences that you and I have do mold us. And I would say this, we've all heard it said that experience is the best teacher. But I'm here to tell you it isn't. Never has been. I've known all kind of people who have had all kind of experience, and they haven't learned anything. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you're getting better. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. The ability to look at where you have been and what you have done and pull back and reflect and evaluate, that's the instructor of our life. Number 4, attitude. Attitudes and choices about those experiences determine what you and I do. Number 5, friends. The friends that we associate with have a great determining factor on who we are and what we do. I close with this paragraph on people principle number 1, the lens principle. The way you view others is determined by who you are. You cannot get away from that truth. If you don't like people, that really is a statement about you and the way that you look at people. Who you are determines how you view others. Your viewpoint is the problem. If that's the case, don't try to change others. Don't even focus on others. Focus on yourself. If you change yourself and become the kind of person you desire to be, you will begin to view others in a whole new light. And that will change the way you interact in all of your relationships.